If you ever take a tour through the Smoky Mountains, make sure your driver's eyes don't leave the road, no matter what you see. If someone knocks from the woods, don't let them in, even if they look like your loved one. And whatever you do, never, ever ask what happened to the last group. Asterisk, I've been a tour bus driver in the Smoky Mountains for nearly 6 years now. That's 2,190 days of winding roads, fog-choked ridges, forest silence, and old legends carried in the wind like whispers through the pines. People think the job is simple. Just pick up a bunch of tourists, tell them a few spooky stories about the woods, and drop them back off in town before sundown. But there's more to it. A lot more. Because the Smoky Mountains don't just hold history, they hold rules. And if you break even one of them, they take you. The company I work for is called Wraith Ridge Tours, and I know how that sounds. Corny, creepy on purpose, just trying to scare up business. But the name is older than me, older than the bus, maybe even older than the road itself. The first day I signed the papers, the owner, a hunched, sun-leathered man named Grant, slid me a second sheet. Handwritten. No letterhead. No explanation. Just a title scrawled across the top. Rules for survival. Read before driving. I remember every single one of them. Even now, leave exactly at 4 p.m. Not a minute earlier. Not a minute later. If you hear laughter coming from the trees, do not acknowledge it. Do not smile. At mile marker 12, a woman in white might try to board. Do not stop. Do not let any passengers off between stops. No exceptions. If the forest goes completely silent, turn off the engine and wait. If a second version of your bus appears, do not look at it. Drive forward without braking. Return before 9 p.m., even if someone goes missing. Especially if someone goes missing. Under no circumstance should you ever take the Ridge detour. The Ridge does not forgive that I thought it was a gimmick. A scare tactic. A joke. That was before I learned the truth the hard way. It was a Thursday in late October, the kind of day where the sky stays gray and thick like wet ash, and every leaf is the color of blood or flame. I had a full tour booked, 11 people, mostly couples, one older woman with a camera the size of a watermelon, and a pale, quiet kid who never took his hoodie down. The usual mix. They loaded in with smiles and Starbucks cups, chatting excitedly, thrilled to be out in real nature. No one ever realizes how alive these woods really are until it's too late that we rolled out of Gatlinburg at exactly 4 p.m. I didn't even have to look at the clock. My body just knew. I always start the route the same way, by telling a few crowd pleasers, legends about ghost brides, Cherokee curses, Civil War soldiers seen wandering the ridges. They eat it up. But somewhere around mile 9, it got quiet. Not on the bus, the woods. No birds. No crickets. No wind through the trees. I felt my chest tighten. I downshifted the bus into idle, pulled to the side of the road, and cut the engine. "Why are we stopping?" asked a man in the front seat, his camera already raised. "Routine," I said, keeping my voice even. "Just part of the experience." Truth was, this was Rule 5. The woods had gone dead silent. That only happened when something was nearby. Something old. Something watching. It lasted for about a minute. Long enough for the older woman to start muttering, "I don't like this. I don't like this one bit." Then, just as suddenly, the wind kicked back up, birdsong returned, and the bus seemed to exhale. I restarted the engine and drove on. I didn't tell them what had just passed by. At mile 12, I braced myself. That's the mile marker the white woman is known to appear at. Sure enough, just past the old gas station ruins, I saw her. She stepped out of the woods with deliberate grace, barefoot, pale, long black hair hanging like moss. She wore a white dress that shimmered in the dying light, though her eyes were like black holes in her face. She raised one hand. Thumb out. "Holy shit, did you see that?" someone shouted. "Was that planned?" Another laughed. "Is that an actor?" "Keep moving," I muttered, eyes front. But the kid in the back, the one in the hoodie, stood up. "She's my mom." The words hit like a bomb. I slammed on the brakes without thinking. "Sit down," I hissed, heart slamming in my chest. "That's not your mom." But the kid was already moving toward the door. "She's not real," I thought. "She's the mountain wearing your mom's face." I had seconds. I hit the override and locked the doors. "Itchy-why?" the kid shouted, face twisted in rage. "Let me off." The woman outside didn't flinch. She just stood there, smiling, her eyes leaking something black and oily. You don't want to open that door, I said softly. You open that door, and you let something else in. Something you'll never get out. The kid froze. He looked at me, then back at her, and finally, he sat down. I gunned the engine and kept going. We hit the overlook around 6:15. It's a clearing high on the ridge, one of the only safe places to let people off for pictures. The sun was bleeding red behind the tree line. I gave them 20 minutes. I don't allow longer. Not anymore. While they snapped selfies and pointed at vague shapes in the fog, I stood beside the bus and lit a cigarette with a shaking hand. Rough day, someone said behind me. It was the older woman, the one with the giant camera. I didn't respond. She glanced at the trees. They're moving. I looked. For a split second, she was right. Something dark shifted between the trunks. They're always moving, I said quietly. They just don't want you to see it. We left the overlook at 6:36. That gave me just under 2.5 hours to get back. Plenty of time. But the road disagreed. At 6:45, just past the waterfall bridge, something appeared in the distance. Headlights, another bus. Same model, same color. And when it got close enough, I saw something that made my blood go cold. It had my same number stenciled on the side. Bus 22. Rule 6. If you see another version of your bus, don't look. I clenched the wheel and focused straight ahead. The other bus slowed. Its windows were dark. I saw shapes inside, figures twitching. Wrong. The other bus pulled alongside. It moved to block the road. The tourists were murmuring, unsure what was happening. I couldn't stop. I pressed the pedal. The other bus didn't move. Hold on, I said, and then I plowed straight through it. There was no impact, no sound. The other bus dissolved like smoke, like fog, like it had never been there at all. But every passenger was silent after that. They'd seen something. Something I didn't dare ask about. We pulled back into town at 8:52 p.m. Just under the wire. As I parked, I did a head count. 1, 2, 3, 10. Not 11. Where's the kid? Someone asked. My stomach dropped. I rushed down the aisle. His seat was empty. His bag was still there. His hoodie hung off the edge like he'd melted right out of it. Did anyone see him get off? I asked in a one head. I thought about the white woman. No. I locked the doors. He couldn't have left, unless something came in. I reported it. Of course I did. Grant gave me a long, hard look. Then he nodded, pulled out a folder, and handed me a clean copy of the rules. You're still alive, he said, which means you're still useful. Same time tomorrow. I should have quit, should have walked away, but I nodded because I knew something now. The mountains weren't done with me, and if I didn't keep driving that bus, they'd come looking. The next day started with fog thick enough to choke. It crawled low along the ground, clinging to the asphalt like something alive, wrapping around the tires of bus 22 as if it didn't want me to leave. That should have been my first warning. That and the quiet. Gatlinburg, for all its tourist glitz, is usually humming by noon. But that morning, you could have heard a whisper from the hills echo all the way into town. Still, I showed up. I always show up, because the rules don't stop just because you're scared. When I stepped into the depot, Grant was already waiting in his usual spot by the vending machine, arms crossed, eyes hidden behind his smoked-out sunglasses. Kid never turned up. I asked. Grant shook his head. No reports. No sightings. No missing persons alert either. What does that mean? He looked me dead in the eyes. Means he ain't missing. He's gone. He handed me the clipboard with the manifest. 11 names. Again, I flipped through them, scanning for anything unusual. Just the usual tourists from out of state. Nashville, Atlanta, one from Denver. I didn't recognize a single name until I hit the bottom. #11, passenger, name not provided. Special instructions, do not engage. What the hell is this? I asked. Grant just said, Rule 9. I blinked. There is no Rule 9. There is now. He tapped the clipboard with one cracked, nicotine-stained fingernail. Don't talk to them. Don't look at them. Don't acknowledge them. Got it. I didn't answer. I just nodded and walked out toward the bus. The group loaded in with the usual mix of excitement and camera straps. Lots of fleece, too many pumpkin spice lattes, and one guy carrying a drone case that looked way too expensive for a national park. I greeted each one, trying not to look too closely at the 11th seat, the one in the far back corner. It was already occupied. I never saw them enter. Didn't hear the footsteps. But when I glanced in the mirror, they were there, black hoodie, Hood up, face obscured, body completely still. I locked eyes with them for a second too long, and then the rearview mirror cracked from the inside. Not a spiderweb crack, either. A line, dead center, like someone had taken a blade to the glass. I swallowed and faced the road that we left at exactly 4:00 p.m. I didn't even have to check the clock anymore. The drive out of town was uneventful. I kept my narration light, retelling the legends with a half-hearted voice. My eyes flicked to the mirrors more often than I'd like to admit. The figure in the back didn't move, didn't shift, didn't blink, but the passengers started noticing. About 20 minutes in, the woman from Nashville leaned toward me and whispered, "Hey, who's the guy in the back?" I smiled tightly. "No one, right?" she said, backing off. But her eyes stayed fixed on the last ROW.AT mile 7. The laughter started, not from the bus. From the woods. It was distant at first, just a faint cackle, like wind caught in a tree hollow. But then it grew closer, sharper, like someone whispering jokes just out of earshot. The laughter was coming from both sides of the road. A few of the tourists started giggling, too, then laughing harder, like they couldn't stop. Even when their faces twisted in panic, their eyes brimming with tears, they couldn't stop. Rule 2. If you hear laughter coming from the trees, do not acknowledge it. Do not smile. I turned off the cabin lights, dimmed the overheads, kept my gaze fixed straight ahead. The laughter in the woods surged. Peals of it, children and adults, mixed, like some backwoods carnival just past the tree line. Then suddenly, silence. Everyone on the bus stopped laughing at once. As if a switch had been thrown. One of the women began to sob quietly, clutching her sides, like something inside had broken loose. The figure in the back didn't move, not an inch. At mile 10, fog rolled back in, thick and unrelenting. My headlights barely cut 10 feet ahead, and the trees looked taller somehow, closer, hungrier. The radio on the dash crackled, just static. Then a voice cut through. "Don't let them leave. Don't let them leave. Don't let them." I shut it off. I knew what this was. The mountain was testing me. At 6:03 p.m., I slowed the bus to a crawl. The GPS had rerouted. I hadn't touched it, and yet it blinked with a new path. Take Ridge Detour. Estimated time saved, 13 minutes. The words pulsed in red. Rule 8. Under no circumstance should you ever take the Ridge Detour. The ridge does not forgive. I ignored it. Hit cancel. The GPS screen cracked, like frost climbing across a window. And that's when the humming started. A low, steady vibration. Not mechanical, not natural. It was coming from the back. The hooded figure. They were humming. A slow, bone-deep melody. Something older than the trees. It didn't sound like a person. It sounded like the forest singing through a corpse. I gripped the wheel tighter. Just keep driving. I told myself. At the overlook, I made the same call as the day before. 20 minutes. That's all. Only 7 passengers got off. One of the others said the guy with the drone had wandered off earlier during the fog. My gut twisted. I knew what that meant. He didn't wander. He was taken. The rules don't care about drones. I told them not to wait. We left him behind. That's how it works. You can't wait in the mountains, because if you linger long enough, the ridge notices. And the ridge always wants one. We made it past the waterfall bridge without incident. I was watching the clock closely. 8:32. We'd make it, just barely. But just before we reached the fork that led out of the forest, I saw them. Figures, dozens of them, standing in the trees, lining the roadside. All of them still, all of them watching. Some looked normal. Hikers, park rangers, kids in ball caps. But others had no faces, no feet, no color, shadows in human shape. And they all had their hands raised in unison, like they were waiting to be picked up. "Don't stop," I whispered. But then the bus began to slow on its own. The gas pedal resisted. The brake hissed. My hands didn't move the wheel, but it began to turn anyway. The bus started to veer toward the shoulder. "No, no, no," I whispered, slamming my foot down. The pedal went to the floor, useless. And that's when I heard the back door unlock. Click. My heart dropped. I turned and looked. Just once. The hooded figure was standing, facing the rear door, reaching for the handle, and something outside was reaching back. I jumped out of my seat, ran to the back, and tackled them away from the door just as it creaked open an inch. The cold that came through that crack was not from earth. I slammed it shut, locked it, punched the override. "Back to your seat," I growled at the figure. They didn't speak, but their hood fell just slightly in the struggle, and I saw nothing underneath that no face. No head, just swirling fog in the shape of a human skull that we rolled back into town at 8:59 p.m. I parked in silence. This time, no one clapped. No one cheered. They just got off the bus, silent, pale, and shaken. All but one, the hooded figure remained, that I stood by the doors, watching them. "You're not on the list," I said. The figure turned its head, slowly. "I am now," it whispered. Then it vanished, just blinked out of existence, like smoke, like a dream that the forest didn't want remembered. When I told Grant, he didn't flinch. He just handed me a new set of papers, that a new list, that at the bottom. #11. Returning passenger. No name. Do not engage. And below that, a new rule, handwritten in ink so dark it shimmered. Rule 10. Some passengers were never meant to leave the ridge. If they return, don't ask why. Just drive. People think it's the woods that are cursed, that the trees carry some ancient evil, older than time, whispering secrets into the ears of the weak and calling out to the lost. They're wrong, that it's the road, that winding, black-topped artery, that snakes through the Smoky Mountains like a vein of ash. That's where the evil lives. The road doesn't take you through the forest. It takes you into it. And sometimes, it doesn't let you back out. I sat in the depot with my coffee, going cold, and a clipboard full of new passengers, dreading what fresh horror tonight's tour would bring. Grant didn't say a word when he handed me the manifest, just nodded like he already knew this ride would be different. There were 12 names this time. 12? I said, "That's not protocol. We don't go above 11. We never." "You do tonight," Grant said. I stared at him. "Since when?" "Since the ridge decided it." I didn't press him. There's a look Grant gets, like the mountains are watching him even inside these walls. You don't argue with that look. I checked the names. Point 10 seemed normal. One was listed as "Do not engage again," my faceless passenger. And the 12th? #12, name unknown. He will be wearing red. That was no instructions. No city of origin. Just a warning and a color. He will be wearing red. The second I saw that, my stomach twisted. Because in all my years doing this job, I'd never had a 12th passenger. Not once. At exactly 3:59 p.m., I unlocked the doors. By 4 o'clock, everyone was seated. The usual types again. Laughing tourists. Honeymooners. A guy with a boom mic. 2 elderly women who looked like they were hoping for a haunted hayride, not a real brush with death. And at the very back, 2 figures sat in absolute silence. Point 1 was my old friend, the hooded no-name from the previous night, still fog-faced, still humming under his breath like an ancient lullaby, and beside him, someone knew that he wore a red windbreaker. Bright scarlet. Too clean. Too still. He didn't move when I started the bus. Didn't blink when we hit the first corner. Just sat there rigid, like he was listening for something under the surface of the road. Point 10 minutes in, the fog came down like a wall. Not mist, not haze. A wall. Dense, wet, and choking. My high beams bounced off it like they were hitting stone. I flicked on the overheads, but even the lights inside the bus seemed muted, and then the passengers started to cough. Not normal coughs. Deep, hacking ones. Like the air had turned thick with smoke. Point 1 woman started gagging, tears running down her cheeks. A man clutched his chest like something was crawling down his throat. I hit the ventilation override. Changed. I pulled to the side of the road and checked the external air filter. It was clogged with moss. Not leaves. Not debris. Moss. Wet, black. Dripping moss that shouldn't be anywhere near this altitude. I tore it free and tossed it into the brush, watching it wriggle like a living thing. When I returned to the driver's seat, every single passenger was silent again, even the ones who'd been choking. They all sat straight, hands in laps, eyes wide, staring at me. Every single one. Like they were waiting that I turned the key. The engine didn't start. Instead, the radio sputtered to life, blasting a voice that was mine. "I shouldn't be here," it said. "I broke the rules. They're going to take me now." Then it looped, over and over. "I shouldn't be here. I broke the rules." The passengers started to repeat it with the radio in unison, softly at first, then louder, then in a chant that shook the windows. "I shouldn't be here. I broke the rules." I slammed the radio off and banged the steering wheel hard enough to bruise my palm. "Stop. Silence. They all blinked. Looked confused, like they didn't remember doing it. But the man in red? He was smiling that we made it to the overlook late 6:57 p.m. The light was nearly gone, and the sun bled out through black clouds like an open wound. I told them they had 5 minutes. No more. 3 passengers got off. 2 ran back on screaming. The third never returned. Something's wrong, the boom mic guy whispered, clutching his gear like a teddy bear. The trees, they're closer than before. He wasn't wrong. Where once the overlook had been a wide clearing with a full 180-degree view, the forest had moved in. The trees now stood barely 5 feet from the railing. Too close, too tall. Their branches angled toward us like arms preparing to embrace. And hanging from one of those branches was the jacket of the missing third passenger, empty, dripping, like it had just been shed. Back on the road, the man in red finally stood and spoke. His voice was soft and far away, like hearing someone scream through a tunnel made of ice. "This is where it happened," he said. That I glanced in the rearview mirror. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring through the glass into the forest. "This is where the ridge was born." Passengers turned. "Excuse me?" one asked. He didn't respond. Just stepped into the aisle and walked forward. I gripped the wheel with one hand, ready to slam the brake if he got too close. But he didn't stop. He walked to the windshield and placed one pale hand against the glass. "You're not driving anymore," he said, and the bus veered left. We turned onto a road I didn't recognize. No signs, that no pavement. Just gravel and dark leaves and shadows that moved when you looked directly at them. The passengers started screaming. I pressed the brakes. Nothing. Wool spun in my hands like it had a mind of its own. The man in red turned to face us. "They broke the pact," he said. "The drivers, the guides, the ones who bring the prey." I stood. "What are you?" He smiled. "An old passenger." The hooded figure behind him stood too. Then it split. 1 became 2.2 became 4. Each figure identical. Each one humming. Each one oozing black fog from the folds of their hoods. Passengers were screaming now, clawing at the doors, at the windows. But the forest had closed in. Trees now pressed against the glass, bark slick with something wet and red. One of the passengers, a teenager, smashed a window open. The forest reached in. A dozen hands, rotten, sharp, pulling. They dragged her out screaming. Her final words lost in the grind of ancient roots tearing through metal. I ran to the controls and hit emergency override. The bus jolted. Lights snapped back on. The red man hissed and vanished in a blink. Just gone. The hooded figures dissolved. Like smoke. I didn't wait. I threw the bus into reverse, tires screaming, and drove backwards for a full mile until I hit pavement again. The road was back. We made it back to town at 9:02 p.m. 2 minutes late. 2 passengers missing. 1 dead. I expected the depot to be dark, silent, but it was crowded. Dozens of people stood outside, wearing old uniforms, older clothing, faded park ranger coats, bus driver hats from decades ago. Their faces were all wrong. Stretched up, blurred, as if time had forgotten how to shape them. One of them stepped forward. A woman with pale eyes and black lips. "You missed your window," she said. "We know what that means." And then they vanished. Inside, Grant was already holding a new clipboard. "You saw the red man," he said. I nodded. "He's angry," Grant continued. "You brought passengers into a place that's not on any map. You let the ridge speak to them." "I didn't let anything." "I know," he said. "That's the problem." He handed me the manifest. 12 passengers again. And a new rule. Rule 11. You are no longer the guide. The ridge chooses now. Obey the road, or it will drive you. Asterisk. I remember the moment everything changed. It was after we had returned from town, when the night was so thick with an uncanny hush that even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I sat alone behind the wheel of bus 22, the metal cold beneath my palms, and tried to piece together a puzzle that defied logic. In the depot's dim light, Grant's face was etched in shadow as he repeated the same warning one last time. The ridge chooses its servants, and you, my friend, have become one of them. My heart hammered as the new clipboard was pressed into my trembling hands, the fresh rule printed in ink that darkly shimmered. Rule 12. When the ridge calls, the guide must go, no matter the cost. The journey back to the mountains began with an almost imperceptible vibration along the road. as if the very pavement was murmuring in a tongue older than time. I forced myself to drive, even though every instinct screamed to abandon the bus and run. Inside, the remaining passengers, those who clung to life and sanity after the previous night's apparitions, sat in silent resignation. Their eyes, haunted and distant, told me they had already experienced the inevitable. I could see in the mirrored windows fleeting images of spectral figures past and future, some in tattered uniforms of long-forgotten park rangers, some in the ghostly guise of lost travelers whose souls were bound to these cursed trails. The bus slowly wound its way down an unmarked road that did not appear on any map. The asphalt gave way to gravel, and before me, the Smoky Mountains rose in an ominous silhouette, their peaks obscured by roiling, pitch-black clouds. At each bend, the rules of the ridge seemed to rearrange themselves like cryptic messages, flickering neon warnings only visible in the corner of my eyes. I could almost hear the mountains whisper, "Your time has come." Inside the bus, the hooded figure from nights past and the red-clad stranger were nowhere to be seen. Instead, each passenger began murmuring fragments of a rhyme, a lament, or perhaps an incantation, and I understood. The ridge was summoning us all into its dark embrace. As we entered a narrow tunnel of ancient firs, the landscape transformed. The trees, whose bark now glowed with an eerie, phosphorescent light, seemed to breathe as if imbued with a living spirit. One by one, every window pane turned opaque, and the world outside receded until I was driving through an endless void of Stygian darkness, punctuated only by the glow of distant, malicious eyes that eye in that void. Time lost all meaning. I no longer recalled whether hours or minutes had passed, only that the oppressive silence was broken by a chorus of whispers. They chanted in unison, voices both male and female, young and old, reciting the ridge's secret laws. My mind reeled, as memories of all the previous tours, every inexplicable occurrence on the road, cascaded over me. I recalled the moment I had slammed on the brakes as an unmoving passenger's hand had reached for the door, the scene of that horrifying white woman whose spectral presence defied explanation, and the vision of my doppelganger bus that had vanished without a sound. I realized then that my life had been a series of tests, each ride a ritual designed to seal my fate. Before long, the road ended in a clearing, a vast, circular expanse surrounded by mountains that loomed like ancient sentinels. The bus came to an unceremonious halt, as if the engine itself had surrendered to forces beyond mortal control. I stepped out onto the cracked, leaf-strewn pavement with no feeling of relief. Instead, the chill of inevitable doom seeped into my bones. In the center of the clearing stood a stone altar, old and worn, with markings that glowed faintly under the moon's baleful gaze. Carved into its surface was a single phrase: "When you ride the path of the doomed, the mountains claim their due." The remaining passengers, now hushed into a state of trance, formed a loose circle around the altar. Their faces were ghostly white in the moonlight, eyes void of fear or defiance, as though they had accepted the ridge's macabre decree. In that moment, the red-clad stranger emerged from the darkness. His presence was commanding, not hostile, but inevitable, a herald of fate. With slow, deliberate steps, he approached the altar, a look of sorrow mingled with grim determination etched into his features. The hooded figure, too, reappeared beside him, their forms merging in spectral unity as they represented the old order of the ridge, a council of those who had once been guides and now served as its eternal arbiters. They spoke in unison, their voices echoing off the mountain walls in a low, sonorous chant. For every soul that rides the cursed path, a price must be paid. The guide, once he has broken the pact of neutrality, must become one with the ridge. In your service, the forgotten shall find solace, and the damned their eternal penance. The words reverberated in my mind as I realized the full extent of my burden. I had been chosen to lead these lost souls into the very heart of the curse, to become the bridge between the living and the dead, a role that both repulsed and magnetized me. That a sudden, bitter wind swept through the clearing, and I found myself standing alone before the altar. My inner voice, the one that had always warned me against the ridge's seductive promises, now pleaded for mercy. Images of family, of a life before the cursed tours, flashed before my eyes. But the mountains were merciless. The wind carried fragments of every broken rule and every shattered dream that had ever taken place on those treacherous roads. The ground trembled beneath my feet, as if the very heart of the Smoky Mountains had awakened. In a moment of involuntary surrender, I stepped forward and placed my hand on the cool stone. Instantly, my vision exploded in a searing flash of memories and foreknowledge. I saw the countless lives drawn into the ridge, the hidden rituals performed by long-dead guides, and the twisted, surreal future where I would vanish from the realm of the living, doomed to roam the endless roads as a spectral driver. The voice of the ridge, a deep, echoing chorus of ancient lament, seemed to speak directly into my soul. Obey or be forever forsaken. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I knelt by the altar. I thought of all the warnings, each rule that I had once scoffed at, and now, in the presence of the ridge's undeniable power, I could no longer deny the grim truth. The bus, the forbidden detours, the ghostly passengers, every unnerving encounter was all an elaborate toll for my transgression. I had broken the pact not just as a driver, but as a man who dared to defy the natural order of things. The ridge, ancient and unyielding, demanded a sacrifice, and I was the chosen one. As I sat in that cursed clearing, surrounded by the echoes of lost souls and the relentless chorus of the mountains, time itself began to dissolve. The faces of the passengers blurred into one collective entity, a haunting tapestry of sorrow and resignation. Some reached out with translucent hands, as if begging me to lead them home. Others glared with eyes full of accusation, reminding me that I had condemned them all. The air grew thick with the stench of decay and damp earth, an odor that seemed to seep into every pore, marking the moment as the end of an era. In the final moments, the red-clad stranger approached me once more. With a gentle yet unyielding motion, he extended his hand toward mine, a gesture both welcoming and final. "You must ride, for this is our destiny," he intoned softly, his voice carrying both sadness and fierce resolve. The hooded figure joined him, and together they guided me toward an old, rusted key that lay half buried in the gravel. Inscribed on it was a single word that shimmered in the moonlight: "Obey." I lifted the key with trembling fingers, knowing that with its touch, my fate would be sealed, and there would be no turning back. In that dark instant, I felt the full weight of every lost soul, every shattered dream, each one a testament to the ridge's inexorable rule. As I inserted the key into an ancient lock embedded in the stone altar, the earth groaned in protest, and a searing light erupted around me. The mountains themselves seemed to open, revealing a hidden chasm that pulsed with a life of its own, beckoning me to step into the abyss. With one final, heart-wrenching look at the faces of those who had trusted me with their lives, I stepped forward. The light swallowed me whole, and for a heartbeat, there was nothing but a vast, echoing silence. Then, as if emerging from an eternity of darkness, I found myself seated behind the wheel of Bus 22 once more. But nothing was as it had been. The bus had transformed into a spectral carriage of endless night. The dashboard glowed with symbols that pulsed in time with my racing heart. And in every mirror, I saw not my own reflection, but the sorrowful eyes of those I had failed to save, accused, pleading, and eternally bound to the cursed route. That I realized with dawning horror that I had become the ridge's new guide, not in service to mortal passengers, but as part of a never-ending cycle of despair. The familiar roads now twisted into surreal, labyrinthine passages leading to lost worlds beyond time and life. I was both captain and captive, doomed to traverse an endless highway of nightmares. Alongside me, the red-clad specter and the hooded council stood in silent vigil, guiding the souls of the damned and reminding me that every rule carries a cost. And so, each twilight, I am compelled to drive along that darkened road. I pick up the unwitting, offer them legends that cloak their terror in false hope, and then lead them into the heart of the ridge where the mountains whisper their ancient decrees. The rules, etched in blood and shadow, remain unbreakable. In my eternal journey, Every lost soul is a reminder that defiance only invites the wrath of an ageless, unforgiving force. The Smoky Mountains have claimed me, just as they have claimed so many before, and will continue to claim the ones who dare to ride the cursed path. Now, as you close your eyes and listen for the distant rumble of a bus engine on a lonely mountain road, remember, if you ever catch a glimpse of a ghostly tour bus in the Smokies, do not peer too closely. For you might see me behind the wheel, forever bound by the ridge's terrible, inescapable decree, a warning that sometimes the price of defiance is an eternity lost in the dark.